of reasons. Obama is inside having a state banquet with the Queen. There are still 100,000 troops in Afghanistan. There are still 50,000 American troops in Iraq. The bombing of Libya is intensifying, and the bombing of Tripoli yesterday was at its height. He hasn't closed down Guantanamo Bay. He claims he wants democracy in the Middle East, but he's still supporting Bahrain and a whole number of other countries who are shooting on their demonstrators. So we're here for all those reasons to say we want this to stop. There's another reason, which is it's estimated that by the autumn, the war in Libya alone will have cost the British government £1 billion. Now, we're in the middle of recession. The other thing they're all talking about at the G8 summit this weekend is how they make ordinary working people around the world pay more for the crisis. They cut their wages, they cut their welfare, they increase the costs of working class people all the time. And yet they say there's no money for any of these things, but there's money for every war they want to do. So all those reasons we're demonstrating here tonight. And there's a huge range of people from different backgrounds, different campaigns to make this point.
As you can see, there's a huge number of people here protesting up many grave injustices, from Guantanamo Bay to the indiscriminate bombing in Libya. But I'm here because I want to particularly highlight the plight of Private Bradley Manning, who this week will have been held in prison, in a military prison, without trial for 1 year. He's got a battery of charges against him, including aiding the enemy, which carries a potential death sentence under US law. I really think that Bradley Manning needs our support. It's alleged that he leaked the information to WikiLeaks, which has exposed, among other things, some horrendous war crimes by US forces, in particular the collateral murder video, which showed American Apache helicopter crews shooting dead 11 innocent Iraqi civilians. It's thanks to Bradley that we know these truths, these facts that have been hidden and covered up by the US Armed Forces. So Bradley Manning is someone very important. We owe him a great deal of debt for shining a light on abuses by the US military in Afghanistan and Iraq, documenting many previously undisclosed killings and injuries of innocent civilians. Only last month, President Obama declared Bradley Manning guilty before he'd even been tried. A quite shocking abuse of the legal process by a man who was, in his previous life, a lawyer. He prejudged the case by saying that Manning had released this information, that he was guilty, that he bears responsibility. That prejudged the case, and I think it now, of course, adds to the momentum that Bradley Manning is going to find it very difficult to get a fair trial. Well, for much of the last 12 months, he was held in a military prison in Virginia, where he was held in solitary confinement. He was not allowed any personal possessions. He had to be constantly on call, often woken up in the middle of the night. He was, in some instances, forced to strip naked on parade, was forced to sleep without his clothes at night. These conditions, these deprivations imposed upon him amounted to cruel, inhuman and degrading punishment, which is of course illegal under the United Nations Convention Against Torture and under the 8th Amendment to the US Constitution. And indeed, 250 US scholars wrote to President Obama criticising the treatment of Bradley Manning, suggesting that his treatment was illegal and unconstitutional. And thanks to those protests by those scholars, those legal scholars, and the other global protests, finally at the end of April, Bradley Manning was moved to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, where he now is being subjected to a more humane regime. I wouldn't say a humane one, but a more humane regime, where he's not in solitary confinement, he's allowed personal possessions, he's got a window to his cell, all the decent things that a humane prison or military system would do anyway. Obama came into office with great promise and great hope. But I think most people would agree that he's dashed nearly all those hopes and promises. Guantanamo Bay is still open. Still we have the war on terror being prosecuted with ever greater vigor around the world. We've got these appalling drone attacks in Pakistan and in Afghanistan, where innocent civilians are being killed. The United States is still sending arms to Pakistan, which are being used to suppress the legitimate national self-determination struggle of the people of Balochistan. Those arms, the Apache attack helicopters, the F-16 fighters, are being used by the Pakistani armed forces to attack villages that are pro-nationalist in Balochistan. And many innocent civilians have been killed. Many innocent human rights defenders, journalists, lawyers in Balochistan have been massacred by the Pakistani military, which is supported by Britain and the United States. That's quite shocking. We should not be supporting a military force that is engaged in these grotesque and systemic human rights abuses.
Because Obama's in the country at the moment, and we object to his position on Guantanamo Bay. We want him to shut Guantanamo Bay down, and particularly release Shakarama, who's been now there for 9 years, a British resident, but in the last 9 years a resident of Guantanamo Bay. The situation with him being locked up, arrested, and without trial, without charge. Clearly crimes, offences against the Geneva Convention. If he is a criminal, he should have fair trial.
And what would you tell Obama about the values of the rest of the world, and particularly the Geneva Convention?
I'd be saying that the values that we all hold dear, the values that supposedly the USA are proud of and fighting for, are values which can't be defended by eroding those values themselves.